The Bible Study Podcast, episode 665. Today, the Bible Study Podcast continues the study of the book of Genesis with chapter 21. Welcome to the Bible Study Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. We continue on with chapter 21, the birth of Isaac. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. And we mentioned earlier, but I'll mention again, Isaac means he laughs. And so there's this good news story here of this long-awaited promise where God had called Abraham decades ago and had promised him that his descendants would be as many as the sands on the shore, as many as the stars in the sky, and now he finally has a son. Now we begin to see what God is going to do to fulfill the promises that he has made. And so this is great news, and so this whole chapter will be filled with good news, not so much. Because the next section here, and this was the lesson actually for today when I'm recording this, is Father's Day, for the Father's Day, and it's a bizarre reading to have on Father's Day because it's Hagar and Ishmael sent away. The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw that the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He set them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. He lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got him a wife for him from Egypt. And so we remember in this section that Isaac is not the first son of Abraham. He's the son of promise. He's the son who was promised. But Sarah had this great idea of, hey, I don't seem to be able to have kids. You're supposed to have a lot of kids. You're supposed to have a lot of descendants. Why don't I give you my slave, Hagar, and she will bear a son for you, which she did. Out of Ishmael will come the Arab nation, who will also trace back to Abraham. But now that Sarah has her own son, this whole idea that she thought up that was not God's plan doesn't look as good to her. And she doesn't, it seems, from what we can tell, ever blame herself for this idea, but she blames Hagar and Ishmael. And I think we can be like that sometimes. We can get ourselves into a pickle and not see that it's our own fault. and really look for blame for other people. The blame game is as old as the Garden of Eden, as we saw a number of chapters ago, with Adam, who says, "The woman you gave me," and puts the blame, as immediately as we have sinned, we're trying to put the blame on someone else. And I think that's what Sarah is doing here. And she's taking out her frustrations on the slave woman Hagar and her son, the son of Abraham, Ishmael. So they send them away. And Abraham doesn't want to do this because he sees that Ishmael is also his son. But God says it's okay, do what Sarah is saying. I will care for him. I will take care of him. And we see the care that God has where he saves them in the desert and points out a well, or makes a well. Don't know which happened here, but discloses to them that there's a well of water so that they don't famish out here in the desert. And I thought it was interesting that she goes a bow shot away and he becomes an archer. Don't know that there's any significance in that. But so now Ishmael has been sent away, and that will come in to be an important thing next week when we get into next week's chapter. But first we have one more part of this chapter, and it's the treaty at Beersheba. At this time, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, said to Abraham, "God is with you in everything you do. Now swear to me here before God that you will not deal falsely with me or my children or my descendants. Show to me and the country where you now reside as a foreigner the same kindness I have shown to you." Abraham said, "I swear it." Then Abraham complained to Abimelech about a well of water that Abimelech's servants had seized. But Abimelech said, "I don't know who has done this. You did not tell me, and I heard about it only today." So Abraham brought sheep and cattle and gave them to Abimelech, and the two men made a treaty. Abraham set apart 7 ewe lambs from the flock, and Abimelech asked Abraham, "What is the meaning of these 7 ewes you gave me you have set apart by themselves?" He replied, "Accept these 7 lambs from my hand as a witness that I dug this well." So the place was called Beersheba because the 2 men swore an oath there. After the treaty had been made at Beersheba, Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his forces, returned to the land of the Philistines. Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there he called on the name of the Lord, the eternal God. And Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines for a long time. And Beersheba can mean well of 7 or well of the oath. And so we get this small, less important story than the story of what happened to Hagar and Ishmael, this story of this treaty between Abimelech and Abraham. As Abraham is dwelling this whole time, from the beginning of the time he is introduced in Genesis until the end of his days, as a foreigner in a foreign land. He is dwelling in the place that God sent him, but it is not his land. And at the time, he is living here among the Philistines. He's living among the land that belongs to Abimelech. And Abimelech is forming this treaty with him because he sees that God has favor on Abraham. And so they form this treaty. But the 2 things that are important about that is, one is throughout the rest of the Old Testament and into the New Testament, where there will be these prophecies from the prophets and this way that we are supposed to remember the strangers and the foreigners, because God's people lived for a while as foreigners in a foreign land. So that's, I think, the first thing, is that we continue to see that is close to the heart of God, as how do we treat those who are powerless? How do we treat those who are foreigners? And do we practice hospitality? So that's, I think, the first thing I would see in that. The second thing that reminds me of is the verses from the New Testament that say that Abraham was looking for a city whose architect and builder was God, that Abraham was going where God sent him, that he was looking for what God was making. Well, God was making something, but what he was making wasn't right now a city. It was a people, and he's just taken one of the first steps here with the birth of Isaac. This is the first of hundreds of thousands, millions of births that will make the people of God, that will make the people of Israel first, and then, of course, from them will come Jesus as well. And so all of us who trace ourselves back to Jesus through faith have a spiritual connection to this people that God is making here in this child of promise that is finally here. And again, a reminder that God's timing and our timing are not the same. And I think of that here as we wait in 2020 when I'm recording this for good news, as we wait for news that vaccines have been developed or that viruses have gone away, when right now it seems like they're heading in the other direction. As we in my country wait for the fulfillment of what the founding fathers said of all men are created equal, as we still work that out here over the course of generations and try and get closer to it and haven't arrived yet, I think of the waiting that Abraham and Sarah had to do for this birth of this son, this very special son, very special to them because he was the child of promise, because he was hoped for so greatly, but not expected. Remember, Sarah gave up hope and said, "Take my servant." But he was still this child that was hoped for. And hope is important, but patience is sadly also important because God's timing is not our timing. As we live in this time of hope, this time where we are called to hope, and called to action also, but called to wait, I pray that God will be with you to give you the patience you need to get through whatever it is you're facing, as Abraham and Sarah had at least enough patience to get here, even if not in a perfect fashion. With that, we're going to end this episode of the Bible Study Podcast. If you have any questions, send an email to host@thebiblestudypodcast.com, or better yet, leave a comment on this episode at thebiblestudypodcast.com. And thanks so much for listening.
Do you ever hear sayings make their way through the culture and the church that seem nice in theory, but are actually theologically problematic? My name is Shara Donahue, and I'm the host of The Bible Never Said That, a podcast where we examine these popular sayings under the lens of biblical truth. We cover sayings like, God won't give you more than you can handle, time heals all wounds, and follow your heart. We also spend time exploring how people use Bible verses out of context. If you want to grow in discernment and truth, join us and subscribe at lifeaudio.com.